Looking back through the annals of history, it is certain that a major constituent in the formation of civilizations is water. Settlements would sprout up near rivers, lakes, and bays, and thrive primarily off of agriculture. As modernity started to take hold of many cultures, causing the outbreak of capitalism, water began serving a new purpose, the transportation of goods. A prime example of a city that developed near an important body of water is Detroit. Detroit has depended on the Detroit River for many vital resources since the city was founded. As a city that relies heavily on manufactured products, the transportation of goods by sea is crucial to the city's success. Furthermore, the Detroit River provides many opportunities for tourist attractions such as the riverfront and Belle Isle. The major benefits that the river has blessed the citizens of Detroit with have come at a cost. Careless groups and individuals from the local Detroit area have thrown and dumped hazardous waste materials into the river for many years. It is undeniable that keeping the Detroit River free from major pollutants is a sizable task. Stretching 32 miles long with an average width of 2,400 feet and depths of 35 to 50 feet, it is unrealistic to believe that every molecule of water could be pure. But does this warrant allowing the mistreatment and ignorance of something that made the creation of Detroit a possibility? An analysis regarding the nature, extent, and causes of the pollution is necessary to fully understand the scope of this problem.
Ever since the first colonists of Detroit started using the water from the Detroit River for a variety of purposes, there has been pollution present in it. Over time, as the city grew, the contamination in the water grew as well. In the 19th century, there were two outbreaks, one of cholera and one of typhoid, which eventually died out. Both were thought to have originated from the waters of the Detroit River. These outbreaks, as well as evidence of other pollutants, led to the creation of the International Joint Commission. The Boundary Waters Treaty of 1909 set up the International Joint Commission between the U.S. and Canada to resolve transboundary issues along the Great Lakes. In 1916, studies conducted by the International Joint Commission showed that present epidemics of cholera and typhoid were indeed being caused by pollution in the Detroit River. Since then, various steps have been taken to improve the poor quality of the water. That year, the city of Detroit started to chlorinate all the water supplies to disinfect them, and in 1929, tests determined the river to be harmless. Over the next 15 years, the point of intake for the water supply was changed to Belle Isle, and wastewater treatment plants were opened in the hope of lessening the pollution. These hopes were cut short when a girl caught typhoid in 1943 after swimming in the Detroit River, and the International Joint Commission was forced to declare the river bacterially contaminated. During the next few years, 1.7 million gallons of waste were dumped in the river every day. This led the International Joint Commission to recommend better sewage treatment for the city. In 1964, studies of the water levels in Lake Erie and the St. Lawrence Waterway determined the primary source of pollution to be phosphorus. In 1970, the International Joint Commission announced that the conditions violated the Boundary Waters Treaty of 1909. On April 15, 1972, the Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement was signed by President Nixon and Prime Minister Trudeau. Its primary purpose was to limit and regulate the amount of phosphorus discharged into the water. The Great Lakes Water Quality Agreement also set up the Great Lakes International Surveillance Plan of 1975 to regulate agencies that work towards understanding the ecosystem of the Great Lakes Basin. These observations are what led to the identification of the 42 areas of concern, areas of the Great Lakes Basin in which human action has affected or has the potential to affect the health of those that come in contact with it. In 1978, the agreement was amended and its primary purpose was changed to eliminating toxic chemicals. 11 chemicals were classified as toxic, and a zero-discharge policy was adopted for them. The 1987 protocol was a second change that kept the body of the agreement the same. However, several annexes were added: remedial action plans and lake-wide management plans. The lake-wide management plans were created to deal with the removal of harmful contaminants specific to each lake individually. The remedial action plans would propose and carry out plans for improving the water quality of each of the 42 areas of concern.
One of the 42 areas of concern is the Detroit River. Years of carelessness and neglect led to a dangerous buildup of toxins in the river. Waterfowl in the river play a vital role in the stability of the ecosystem, and oil leaks from nearby industrial plants were poisoning them. By 1992, Stage 1 of the Detroit River Remedial Action Plan had been drafted and passed through legislation. 8 beneficial use impairments are classified as issues and will not be tolerated within the river. The problems listed include tainting of fish flavor, fish deformities, and restrictions on drinking water consumption. Solutions to these problems, such as more frequent chemical testing and restrictions on dumping in the river, were outlined in the policy as well. Shortly afterwards, the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality did an update on the progress of the plan. 104 new recommendations were made, mainly to protect the wildlife not specifically mentioned in the original draft. The policy is also moving in a new direction under the leadership of the Friends of the Detroit River. For example, in 2003, the U.S. EPA granted the Friends of the Detroit River a grant to cover the costs of training a citizen volunteer group to look for certain pollutants that could potentially be found in the river.
As pointed out by the history of the Detroit River, there are many causes and problems of pollution in the water. In 1886, the first observance of contamination made by the disposal of garbage in the river led to the initial outbreak of typhoid in the people. Even after this problem had been diminished, more sightings of contaminated water in the years 1916 and 1943 were found and led to more outbreaks. In 1916, the International Joint Commission put in place a regulation to start adding chlorine to the water to disinfect it. However, this treatment led to the widespread killing of all bacteria, which further led to the killing of the rest of the ecosystem and aquatic life. Another problem in the river is the direct dumping of waste. Between the years of 1946 and 1948, millions of gallons of both waste and oil were dumped into the Detroit River. The oil led to the killing of over 11,000 ducks because the oil coated their wings, which led to them not being able to fly and making them too heavy to float. The year 1969 was the beginning of chemicals and pharmaceuticals being dumped into the river. In this year, mercury dumping had been found in the river, which made the fish toxic and eliminated the use of them as food. In 1970, high levels of polychlorinated biphenyls were found to be in the river. How about some quick chemistry and biology? Polychlorinated biphenyls, or PCBs, are molecules that consist of 2 benzene rings bound together and chlorines about 1 to 10 in each molecule bound to the rings. They are found in machinery that deals with coolants and dielectric fields. When they enter the body through the water, they react to cytochrome P450, Site 1A1 and 1B1, which induce the cytochrome to cause cancer to the body. The chlorines on the ring kill all living bacteria in the body and can ultimately lead to the degradation of certain mechanisms in the process of the body. Got that? As complicated as this may seem, just wonder how it is affecting the way we consume water. To all of these problems lie multiple solutions. After the realization of all the contaminants in the river in 1886, the International Joint Commission was made to regulate, control, and survey the Detroit River for any contaminants. Also, many water treatment plants have been set up to clean the water of these contaminants. The solution of using chlorine to disinfect the river after more typhoid outbreaks worked for a while until further information showed it actually did damage to the aquatic life. This method was stopped after the realization of what was happening. After the dumping of waste and oil in the Detroit River, Michigan amended the Water Pollution Control Act to better define pollution and set up Michigan Water Resources Commission. This led to the regulation of waste dumping in the river, and which also saved the ducks. After the mercury dumping in 1969, regulations were set up to stop this dumping by forcing industries to stop using and dumping mercury, shut the fisheries down, and stop the consumption of fish. After 1970, the government amended the Safe Drinking Water Act, which forced water treatment plants to monitor what is in the water, report these to the Environmental Protection Agency, and find a solution to remove these toxins in the water.
It seems like all the problems in the Detroit River have been fixed. So why are we concerned about the river? What can we do as citizens to help with the problems in the river if there are none? Well, you are right about one thing. Most of the problems with pollution in the Detroit River are controlled or resolved. But there are some things you can do. Raise awareness. Just because there are no problems now, it does not mean that there will be no problems in the future. If we all make it aware that the river is an utmost concern, then people may treat our river better. Second, volunteer at some organizations such as the Friends of Belle Isle, the Friends of the Detroit River, and the Greening of Detroit that are made to control some of these problems with pollution. The Greening of Detroit was founded in 1989 to improve the quality of life in Detroit by guiding and inspiring the reforestation of Detroit's neighborhoods, boulevards, and parks through tree planting projects and educational programs. The project you can get involved with that relates to the pollution in the Detroit River is the Great Lakes Restoration Initiative Reforestation Project. Before we explain what this project is all about, let's look at some background information. CSO, short for Combined Sewer Overflow, is the oldest engineering system in the country. Here's how it works. The water from storm runoff, the sanitation department, and your homes all go to the same municipal wastewater treatment plant. This means that the clean stormwater is contaminated first and then purified with the rest of the water. It also means that during a large storm, the CSO can overflow into lakes and rivers and contaminate them. There were many lawsuits in the Lower Rouge community about these overflows, and the city of Detroit was required to provide inline storage. Inline storage is underground tunnels that hold stormwater and keeps it separate from the contaminated waters. Sadly, the city of Detroit cannot afford to carry out this project, but all hope was not lost. There is such a thing as a U.S. Forest Service grant that provides the funding necessary for creating green infrastructure, which can then act as a substitute for inline storage. You're probably wondering how green infrastructure prevents sewer overflow. Don't worry, it's not that complicated. Basically, trees are planted over large areas to absorb the stormwater so that it never has to go through the wastewater treatment plant. The Greening of Detroit is the organization that received this grant for a pilot project to begin implementing this technique in Detroit. However, a volunteer organization can't function without volunteers, so get involved. This spring, the Greening of Detroit is planting 4,000 trees in coordination with the Earth Family Foundation and 4,000 more in the fall. That requires 7,000 volunteers for each season. You can help keep your water clean by contacting Justin Wojak, the volunteer coordinator for the Greening of Detroit, at volunteer@greeningofdetroit.com or on his cell 1-313-237-TREE. You can also join the Citizen Forester program, a leadership position that involves you in the environmental field. You'll help plant and maintain prairies and forests in your community. The greening will also teach you how to direct the water spouts from your house towards empty lawn areas so that the clean water is immediately absorbed by the ground. It will eventually end up in the river as clean as if it fell right in. Third, speak up. If you do not like something about the treatment or methods of controlling the pollution in the Detroit River, you can directly comment on these types of issues right on the Environmental Protection Agency website at www.epa.gov. By speaking up, your voice could be heard by the agency and they will try and incorporate your views in one of their policies. As you have just seen, there are many different aspects to the problem of pollution in the Detroit River. The pollution itself consists of various components. The problem is not caused by any one source. Chemical spills, oil pollution, and sewage all contribute to the severity of the pollution. There are also many different effects of the pollution. People, animals, and the environment are all sensitive to the pollution present in the river. Fish and waterfowl are harmed to great measures by the contaminants they are exposed to. The problem is of great severity, and there are many measures taken to ensure that it is dealt with effectively. 2 countries, 1 state, 1 province, and various cities have all joined forces to resolve the issue at hand. The role of the individual is important as well, and it is essential that local citizens get involved. Spread the word about the pollution in the Detroit River and do your part to ensure that it continues to be taken care of.